It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And welcome to my listeners here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio, and also on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live and the other Facebook Lives we've got currently running. If you're interested in reading some of my columns on Penn Live or checking out prior podcasts of the show or some great merchandise we have, you can take a look at the markscaringishow.com website. And make sure to follow me on Twitter and YouTube for updates on the show and for podcasts of the show. And today we're going to be talking about the impeachment inquiry. We're going to be talking about the testimony provided by former Ukrainian ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, and also the revelation, the blockbuster occurrence, and that was President Trump tweeting during Yovanovitch's testimony, and how Democrats are now calling that tweet intimidation of a witness, a federal crime, and there's consideration that they will be drafting an article of impeachment based upon their allegation that the president's tweet constitutes the federal crime of intimidation of a witness. So we're going to get into all of those issues today on the Mark Scaringi Show, and you're welcome to comment on the various Facebook Live programs we've got running, or call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580, and we'll hear your thoughts on the impeachment inquiry currently going on in Washington, D.C. today. And before we get into the specifics of it, one, I think, interesting fact is that although this week we transitioned into the public hearing phase of the impeachment inquiry, it looks like the top-secret closed-door depositions are still going on. In fact, there is a top-secret closed-door deposition going on today, this morning, in Washington, D.C. So it's partially public, but apparently parts of it are still closed to the public. So we'll see how Democrats try to spin that. But the impeachment inquiry, the public hearing phase of it, is off to the races. We heard from Ukrainian Ambassador Bill Taylor. We also heard from State Department official Greg Kent and former Ukrainian Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. Now, she was the ambassador from 2014 to 2016, and her claim to fame so far is that she cried during the depositions before the House Intelligence Committee earlier in the matter, during those closed-door depositions. But during the public hearing of the past day or two, the past 2 days, she fared a little better. No public tears, so she's doing better. But she's obviously upset. And perhaps a little bit retaliatory or vengeful against the president because he fired her. He fired the Ukrainian ambassador, and in her testimony, it's pretty evident that she's a committed globalist who not only dislikes but despises Trump's America First foreign policy. Now, she was called by Democrats to support their impeachment effort. But in my view, her testimony backfired. It backfired for two reasons. One, she admitted she is aware of no evidence that President Trump committed a crime concerning this pausing of aid to Ukraine. And two, she actually provided more grounds in support of Vice President Joe Biden's obvious criminal conduct concerning his now infamous quid pro quo. And our president, President Trump, has taken to calling the former vice president quid pro quo Joe, in addition to Sleepy Joe. And I think that sobriquet fits very well. That was former Vice President Joe Biden's threat that he would not release the $1.5 billion U.S. taxpayer loan guarantees unless the Ukrainian president fired his chief prosecutor, who was at the time investigating Burisma, the Ukrainian natural gas company founded and owned by the Ukrainian oligarch with strong ties to Vladimir Putin and the Russians, and upon whose board of directors sat young Hunter Biden. First, on President Trump's alleged criminal wrongdoing, Republican Congressman Chris Stewart, I thought, did a very nice job in his cross-examination of former Ukrainian Ambassador Yovanovitch in just two simple questions. It was short and sweet and to the point, the way good cross-examination is. The Republican Congressman Stewart asked the question, very simply and directly, do you have any information regarding the President of the United States accepting any bribes? The answer from Yovanovitch, no. The Republican Congressman Chris Stewart continues with a follow-up question. Do you have any information regarding any criminal activity that the President of the United States has been involved with at all? Any criminal activity at all involved with by President Trump? The former Ukrainian ambassador, Yovanovitch, and the star witness from the Democrats, her short and sweet answer, no. So, in my view, the case is closed. No crimes. This is the star witness, Yovanovitch, who was the Ukrainian ambassador at the time from 2014 to 2016. She testifies she's not aware. She has no evidence that President Trump accepted any bribes or was involved in any bribes. No evidence that the President of the United States was involved in any criminal activity concerning Ukraine. So that's the end of the story. There are no crimes here, let alone high crimes and misdemeanors. Yet, of course, the impeachment inquiry will go on and on and on. It'll go on until Nancy Pelosi finally realizes how disastrous this impeachment inquiry has become to her chances to take the presidency in 2020 and maintain the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. I think that's when this impeachment inquiry will be over. We may not even get to a vote on impeachment. We shall see. We'll see how the polls go. But I think the polls are starting to turn, and I think the American people are seeing there is just no there there. There's just nothing here. There just aren't any crimes. And remember, over the past day or so, the media and Democrats have been floating the crime of bribery. But now we have their star witness, the former Ukrainian ambassador. She's under oath. She has to tell the truth. She's asked that question by the Republican Congressman Chris Stewart, and the answer is no. She's not aware of bribery involving the president. She's not aware of any crime or crimes involving the president. So just in those two questions, just in that very brief, it took a minute or two, a very brief cross-examination, we see that the Democrat star witness, former Ukrainian Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, has now become the star witness for President Trump that he is innocent of any crimes, let alone high crimes and misdemeanors. And this impeachment inquiry is, as we all knew it was from the start, a sham. We'll talk more about the impeachment inquiry, and then we're going to get into this new revelation, this new scandal that's rocking Washington, D.C., that President Trump tweeted, and the tweet about Yovanovitch during her testimony constitutes the federal crime of intimidation of a witness. We'll talk more about this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And we're here on WHP 580 AM and iHeartRadio. And we're also on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live and some other Facebook Lives that are currently running. So you're welcome to comment live or call in the old-fashioned way, 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. We're talking about the impeachment inquiry that is still going on in Washington, D.C. today. We've had some blockbuster hearings. Well, actually, I think they were real snoozers of hearings. the Bill Taylor hearing earlier in the week. I caught a little bit of it during my lunch break, nodded off twice, and decided that I couldn't stay awake and continue to watch these hearings, so I had to go back to work, get a cup of coffee, and get back at it. The Yovanovitch hearing was also a real snoozer. I mean, these people just have nothing to say that is material and relevant to the issue at hand, which is not whether or not they disagreed with President Trump's America First foreign policy, not whether or not their feathers were ruffled because the president clearly didn't know who they were, didn't care to hear what their thoughts were. The president knows what he wants out of his foreign policy. He knows what he wants out of Ukraine. And so their testimony really has no relevance to whether or not the president committed a high crime or a misdemeanor. And Yovanovitch, the former Ukrainian ambassador, who's one of the star witnesses for the Democrats, she admitted under cross-examination she's aware of no evidence that President Trump committed any crime concerning the pausing of aid to Ukraine. And she actually provided more grounds in support of the allegation that former Vice President Joe Biden, when he was the point person for President Obama for the United States and Ukraine back in 2016, that he actually committed an act of corruption. And that's why President Trump has taken to referring to the former vice president as quid pro quo Joe, because the name fits. The moniker is right on target for the former vice president. I think it's more adept, more apt than Sleepy Joe, although that's pretty good too. But the former Ukrainian ambassador, she provided more grounds to support the allegation that Joe Biden committed corruption in Ukraine. Now, of course, she tried hard to act like there was no there involving Joe Biden, and that even though, she describes herself as an anti-corruption fighter in Ukraine. Wow, she must be very tough. Marie Yovanovitch, former Ukrainian ambassador, Obama appointee, she is on the job. She's fighting corruption in Ukraine, right? Well, what did she do about allegations that Vice President Joe Biden had committed corrupt acts in Ukraine? What did she do about that? Well, nothing. We'll get into that. But first, a little background on Hunter Biden, Burisma, and Joe Biden. Now, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, he was appointed to the board of Burisma in 2014. That was the same time his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, was appointed by President Obama as the point person in U.S.-Ukrainian aid. Now, at the time, the founder and owner of Burisma, which is the natural gas company on whose board of directors Hunter Biden was appointed, the founder and owner is this Mykola Zlochevsky. This Zlochevsky, he was under investigation by the chief prosecutor of Ukraine for corruption. Now, a Ukrainian official with strong ties to Zlochevsky admitted that the only reason that Hunter Biden secured that appointment to the Burisma board was to, quote, protect, end quote, the company from foreign scrutiny. Well, that sounds a little fishy. And remember, Hunter Biden did that interview just a few weeks ago on national television. He admitted during the interview that he was hired to the Burisma board because he was the vice president's son. That's his qualification. Remember, Hunter Biden had no prior experience in the energy sector, had no prior experience sitting on boards of directors, it doesn't even speak Ukrainian, had never been to Ukraine, and in fact, when he sat on the board, apparently he participated via telephone or via video conference. He was never in Ukraine, yet he's raking in Ukrainian dollars because his father was the vice president at the time. Now, the same month that Biden was tapped for the board for the Ukrainian for the board of directors on Burisma, the government of Great Britain froze the financial accounts belonging to Burisma's founder and owner, Zlochevsky. He was under suspicion for money laundering. Now, why this? Not only had Zlochevsky had his assets frozen in Great Britain, but remember, he was the former Ukrainian Minister of Natural Resources. So, and the allegation is, it's a corruption allegation. He's accused of abuse of power, large-scale embezzlement, illicit self-enrichment while serving in the government of the ousted Viktor Yanukovych from 2010 to 2012. And Zlochevsky, the founder and owner of Burisma, who put Hunter Biden on his board, he was later charged with corruption for using his ministerial office to approve oil and gas licenses to companies under his control. So, to make it very clear, Zlochevsky was an oligarch. He was he was the minister of ecology in Ukraine, meaning he's the chief minister who will grant your license or permit if you want to pump natural gas in Ukraine. And to which companies did Zlochevsky grant these licenses and permits? Well, it turns out to companies that he owned. So, I mean, this is classic self-dealing. This is classic corruption. This is a government minister giving natural gas licenses and permits to companies that he owns, the biggest one, Burisma. So he's making himself rich. And in order to protect himself from the prying eyes of Westerners, he puts the then Vice President of the United States' son, Hunter, on his board. And officials in Ukraine say that was done to protect the company. Now, so that's kind of a little bit of the backstory. And by the way, this Zlochevsky, while Hunter was on the board, he was charged. He was charged with these corruption crimes. There was an arrest warrant for him, and he fled the country. Where did he go? To Russia, because he's a Russian-backed oligarch. So this is kind of a little bit of the backdrop here, the background to fully understand the Biden family involvement in Ukraine with this entirely corrupt Ukrainian oligarch, this Zlochevsky character. And remember, Joe Biden, he was publicly bragging about firing, reportedly threatened to withhold more than $1 billion in U.S. aid to the Ukrainian government if it didn't remove the prosecutor who was prosecuting Zlochevsky. He was not only investigating, but prosecuting. They charged the guy with crimes. They couldn't grab him because he was in Russia. Now, when Joe Biden was vice president and issued that threat, he told the Ukrainian president, you better fire the prosecutor who's investigating Burisma, or I'm going to withhold, you're not getting $1 billion in aid. Within hours of Joe Biden's threat to withhold that $1 billion in aid, guess what? The prosecutor was fired within hours. Now, the prosecutor, Shoikin, he admitted that prior to his termination from employment, he was warned to back off the Burisma matter. In fact, this former Ukrainian inspector general, this Viktor Shoikin, he signed a sworn affidavit prepared for and filed in a European court under oath and testified that the reason he was fired in March of 2016, when Joe Biden was vice president and Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma, the reason why Shoikin was fired, and this is according to sworn testimony in court, was that because the vice president, Joe Biden, was unhappy with his probe of the natural gas company that was paying the vice president's son anywhere from $50,000 to $80-some thousand a month. Now, that is extremely damning evidence. That is extremely damning evidence of corruption involving former Vice President Joe Biden in Ukraine. That's what President Trump was talking about when he was talking to the Ukrainian President Zelensky a few months ago about looking into this obvious corruption involving the Biden family. And it's Shoikin's successor, who, by the way, of course, is now himself being investigated for public corruption. He dropped the investigation into Burisma and Zlochevsky in 2017. And as a result, Zlochevsky, he returned to Ukraine in February of 2018 after these investigations had been dropped. And then just a few months after he returned to Ukraine, there were recordings of conversations between the then president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, and Zlochevsky that were released implicating Zlochevsky in graft. So it's not over. In June of 2018, there was a district court that annulled, that basically voided the earlier ruling by the Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office to close the criminal proceeding against Zlochevsky. So we shall see how this all works out. Now, what happened when that occurred, when they voided the decision to close the criminal proceedings against him in 2018? Well, he fled again, this time to Monaco. Why Monaco? Because now Zlotchevsky's super rich. He's part of the uber rich and the elite. He's made millions and millions and millions of dollars through his corruption in Ukraine, through Burisma, who sat on the board of directors during this period of time? Hunter Biden. So there's a lot of evidence there. There's a ton of evidence for any inquiring mind at all, including maybe the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine at the time, Maria Yovanovitch, the Democrat star witness who describes herself as an anti-corruption fighter. She's there. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, U.S. taxpayers, Maria Yovanovitch is your fighter. She is your champion. She's over there in Ukraine slugging it out, really ferreting out, rooting out corruption and protecting U.S. taxpayer dollars. And of course, you can't cite any evidence of actually doing that. And the massive corruption involving the Biden family was happening while she's there. She's right there when this is all going on. And when she's asked yesterday during cross-examination about this, she said, well, that's not in my jurisdiction. Something to that effect. What? I thought you were an anti-corruption fighter in Ukraine. More about this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Let's get back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking today about the impeachment inquiry and whether or not President Donald J. Trump committed another federal crime. They're accusing him now, and that is of intimidation of a witness because he sent out a tweet during the testimony of former Ukrainian ambassador Maria Yovanovitch. We're going to talk about that tweet in just a minute. I want to wrap up what I'm talking about here on the Hunter Biden and Joe Biden corruption and Yovanovitch, who is a self-described anti-corruption fighter in Ukraine. She's the Ukrainian ambassador when this is all going on. She apparently didn't see it. Hear no evil, see no evil. So she's tough on corruption in testimony, but she can provide no real-life examples of where she actually rooted out corruption. And the massive corruption that went on involved her then somewhat of a boss. She's in the State Department. Her boss was a Secretary of State, John Kerry, at the time. But ultimately, you've got the Vice President of the United States, whose son is making millions of dollars governing a company whose founder and owner was not only under investigation, he was criminally charged with corruption involving his company and had fled the country. In any event, Maria Yovanovitch was asked about this by a Republican congressman, and she said, well, whether or not, Biden's son serving on the board of directors of this Ukrainian gas company, whether or not that was wrong, she said, well, it was not the focus of what I was doing. Interesting. It wasn't the focus of what she was doing. It's one of the biggest companies in Ukraine. Its founder was charged, indicted for corruption, fled the country. The sitting vice president's son is on the board of directors. Even the New York Times, the liberal New York Times, was running stories about this does not look good for the Obama administration. But our Ukrainian ambassador at the time said she wasn't focused on that. Okay, all right. So she wasn't focused on much of anything, apparently. And twice during these hearings, Yovanovitch stated that she did not believe that former Vice President Joe Biden's demand that Ukraine fire a prosecutor investigating Burisma had anything to do with his son's role on the board. She said, I actually don't think it had anything to do with the Burisma case. But just a second or two ago, she had testified it wasn't her focus. So it wasn't her focus. She wasn't focused on Hunter Biden being on the board and his father threatening to withhold Ukrainian aid if the prosecutor who was investigating him wasn't fired. She said that wasn't her focus, but she is able to draw the conclusion that, oh no, the firing of the prosecutor had nothing to do with the Burisma case. So, in one hand, it's not in her focus, and in the other hand, boy, it really is in her focus, enough for her to reach that conclusion. She did admit, finally, that Hunter Biden's role on the board could raise the appearance of a conflict of interest. You don't say. But she didn't agree that Biden's threat to force the prosecutor investigating Burisma was problematic. And she had no problem with that. She also said she never spoke about Hunter Biden's role with Burisma with the State Department, even after George Kent, the bow tie wearing State Department official who testified the day or two prior, he raised concerns with the vice president's office that this looked bad. This is a conflict of interest. Yovanovitch was aware of George Kent's feelings, but didn't do anything or say anything about it. And then, under questioning from another congressman, Marie Yovanovitch admitted she was, in fact, coached by the Obama State Department officials to respond to questions about Hunter Biden, well, by simply referring members of Congress to whose office? The vice president's office. So she's just a stooge. She's a stooge in the Obama administration who's apparently covering and not looking at the obvious corruption involving Vice President Joe Biden and his son. You could see why Trump is infuriated by this woman, a self-described anti-corruption fighter who's turning the other way, looking askance at massive corruption in Ukraine with the Vice President Joe Biden, the Obama administration. She does nothing. You can see why Trump fired her. She should have been fired on day one of Trump's administration. All right, we'll talk. I want to get into the tweet by President Trump about Yovanovitch while she was testifying, but I know there are some callers here waiting to get on, so we're going to open up the phone lines and we'll hear John from Colonial Park. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Yeah, Mark. 3 points.
Go ahead.
One, I don't think any of the three witnesses have lied. That's number one. Number two, the young lady from New York that's a Republican that keeps interrupting. She keeps looking back after she makes a statement. I don't understand why she's doing that. I guess she's getting approval. And then third, what's the difference between Hunter Biden and Derek Kushner? What is his qualifications to do the job he's doing right now?
Yeah, well, the issue with Hunter Biden is that while he was serving on the board of directors of Burisma, and as a member of the board of directors, you are actually in charge of governing the company that you sit on the board for. So you're in charge of the company. The founder and the owner of the company was charged with various criminal charges regarding corruption involving that very company.
Okay, I understand that.
Okay.
Here's my question. If Hunter Biden did something illegally, somebody somewhere in the United States government should know that, correct?
Well,
and this young lady that testified that you keep talking about, she not only served under a Democratic president and Republican,
yeah,
correct?
Yes. I don't know if anybody in the United States knew what Hunter Biden did or didn't do. No one in the United States at the time, nobody in the Obama administration investigated the Hunter Biden situation. George
Kent. She
Kent
was over there when George Bush was the president.
George Kent. Well, she was Ukrainian ambassador from 2014 to 2016. During the Obama administration. Listen, George Kent, the State Department official, he had concerns about the obvious conflict of interest.
Yes,
and when he raised those concerns, he was told not to bother the vice president. Well, why would you raise the conflict of interest concerns with the vice president? He's the focus of the conflict. Why wouldn't you raise them with the president of the United States? Why wouldn't the president of the United States, Barack Obama, say, hey, Joe, you can't have your son on the board of the Ukrainian company. I put you in charge of rooting out corruption in Ukraine. The founder and owner of that company is being charged with corruption. You got to get your son off that board, Joe.
Okay, and now here's my simple question.
Yeah.
Where was the Justice Department? Because they're not Democrat or Republican; they're the Justice Department, and you're supposed to be a good attorney, right?
Well, allegedly.
You know as well as I do that there's more here than what we'll ever hear.
Well, the Obama Justice Department at the very highest level, one could argue credibly, was entirely corrupt, from Peter Strzok to Lisa Page to Jim Comey.
But as a good attorney, you know one thing.
Yeah.
You have to prove it.
Yes, sir, you do.
And unless
let's have an investigation. So let's do
Right.
when Donald Trump was on the phone with the Ukrainian President Zelensky and said, "Hey, can you look into these allegations of corruption involving the Bidens in Ukraine? Let's look into them. Let's have a little bit of an investigation. What's wrong with that? If there are credible allegations of corruption, I don't think you can. I don't think that you can deny that. So let's have an investigation. But Maria Ivanovich, she turned the other way, right? She said, no, I wasn't focused on that. That's not something I was interested in, and I don't think there was any corruption.
Mark, you're wrong there.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't there when that phone call happened.
No, she was there during the corruption. She was there. She was the
During
Ukrainian.
the corruption, yes.
Yeah.
During the corruption, yes. But Congressman Nunes made a point at the beginning in his opening statement that you weren't even there when the call was made, so why are you here?
Yeah, well, the call, right? The call between Trump and Zelensky was in July of 2019. Hold on a second, John. The Biden corruption, it was between 2014 and 2016. During that period of time, Hunter Biden was on the board of directors of Burisma. His father was the vice president of the United States, and Maria Ivanovich was our ambassador to Ukraine.
Right.
And she testified she was aware of George Kent and others raising a conflict of interest, and she did nothing. She did nothing to follow up on the conflict of interest, and she did nothing to investigate the obvious corruption that was occurring right in front of her, but it involved Biden. It involved Democrats, so she turned the other cheek.
I agree with you 100%. My last question is this.
Well, you're a very smart man, John.
The affidavit that was submitted into evidence of the transcript of the call, at the beginning of the transcript, there's a statement that says this is not totally the whole call. Is that correct? Why don't we get the whole call?
Well, they didn't transcribe it. So they didn't have stenographers there taking shorthand, and they didn't record it.
But you know as well as I do, back when George W. Bush was in, and he did the thing with the little thing in Maryland, the CIA agency or NSA, right?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that, John. You got to wrap it up because I got to take a quick commercial break.
Real quick.
Yeah.
They said they were recording calls.
Yeah, I'm not aware that I'm not aware they recorded this. If there's a recording, then they can play the recording. But I think there were just individuals in on the call taking notes, and I think that's what the memo is. John from Colonial Park, thanks for your call. Thanks for your points. Very good points. Thank you for ultimately agreeing with me and telling the world that I'm a very good attorney. I think you're right on point. We're going to take a brief commercial break. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show.
Now back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And thanks for tuning in on WHP 580 AM and iHeart Radio, and also on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, where you're welcome to post a comment, and we'll try to read your comment live, or call in the old-fashioned way. 717-540-0580. We heard from John from Colonial Park. Started out disagreeing with me, but I think toward the end of the call agreed with me and said a couple of times that I'm a good attorney. So we thank him for that call. That was very kind of him. And we promised that we would talk about the bombshell that occurred during former Ukrainian ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. Boy, we've heard a lot from this lady over the past 2 days, and apparently she really ultimately had nothing to say. She was not involved in the telephone call. She did testify. She's not aware that President Trump committed any crime. So I think that's pretty good. And she also revealed that she was aware of the conflict of interest involving the Bidens and that she did nothing to pursue it. She just turned the other way because, after all, he was the vice president of the United States and she's with him. And that's that. Anyway, as this lady is testifying, the president of the United States, who, by the way, has been barred, has been prohibited by the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, who's conducting an impeachment inquiry in the Intelligence Committee where it shouldn't be, where an impeachment has never been conducted in an Intelligence Committee before in the history of the United States. Yet, here we are today with the Intelligence Committee conducting the impeachment, and Adam Schiff barred, refused, prohibited the President of the United States to have legal representation during the public hearing. So there is no attorney, there's no lawyer there on behalf of President Trump to participate in any way. The president's very upset about this. Republicans are. I think fair-minded American citizens are very upset by this as well. How can you defend yourself if you can't participate in the hearing that has been convened and is occurring against you, where witness after witness is being called by the opposition political party that has sought your impeachment from the first day you were sworn into office and actually tried to interfere and stop you from being even elected to that office. And President Trump's not able to participate in this public hearing. Remarkable, isn't it? So Yovanovitch is going on and on again, and she's saying nothing of material relevance to the issue, other than the issue being, did the president commit a high crime or misdemeanor, other than the fact that she said, no, she's not aware. She's not aware of any crime the president committed. Well, shouldn't that be the end of the case? I mean, isn't that when the judge hits the gavel and says, case closed, I've heard enough? Come on. Anyway, so the president sends out one of his beautiful, lovely tweets. Okay, and that has the Democrats up in arms, and they are now talking about adding another article of impeachment. We don't have any so far, but these hypothetical articles of impeachment, they're going to add one for intimidation of a witness. Okay, so let's get to the tweet. Where is the tweet? Here's the tweet. The president tweets out while this lady's testifying. Remember, he has no attorney there. He's not able to ask her a question under oath. So he tweets. He tweets out, everywhere Marie Yovanovitch went turned bad. She started off in Somalia. How did that go? Then fast forward to Ukraine, where the new Ukrainian president spoke unfavorably about her in my second phone call with him. It is a U.S. president's absolute right to appoint ambassadors. They call it serving at the pleasure of the president. The U.S. now has a very strong and powerful foreign policy, much different than in preceding administrations. I think he means preceding administrations. In any event, it is called, quite simply, America First. With all of that, however, I have done far more for Ukraine than O. Who's O? No, it's not Oprah. It's Obama. So that's the president's tweet. And I'll have to pose the question to my listeners, did the president commit a crime with that tweet? Is that tweet a crime? Call in 717-540-0580, 717-540-0580, and let me know, is that tweet that I just read from President Trump, is that a crime? Or you can comment on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live or the other Facebook programs we've got going on. Because I want to know what your answers are before I give my answer. So we'll see if we get any calls before I kind of get into my answer. Here, I'll give you the law. And this is from the United States Crimes Code, Title 18, Section 1512. tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant. And I'm going to go through each section of this offense because our Democratic friends, remember, are threatening to write an article of impeachment, impeaching the president for committing the crime of witness intimidation. They didn't find any other crimes. They didn't find bribery. They didn't find extortion. None of that. But here we have intimidation of the witness. The lovely Marie Yovanovitch is the witness in question. She's testifying. And by the way, she's not aware of the tweet until Adam Schiff, the Democratic chairman, reads it to her. So is Adam Schiff a conspirator in this federal crime of witness intimidation? He's reading her the tweet. If the tweet is intended to intimidate the witness, why is Adam Schiff reading it to her? He's intimidating her himself by reading the tweet. You can see it's all a total farce. It's a complete farce. Anyway, so here are the elements of the offense. A1. Oh, this is Title 18, Section 1512. Whoever kills or attempts to kill another person with the intent to blah, blah, blah. I think we can skip this one. No one yet has accused President Trump of killing or attempting to kill Marie Yovanovitch. She's there. She's live and well, and she's doing fine. Okay, A2. Whoever uses physical force or the threat of physical force against any person, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, I think we can agree President Trump did not use or attempt to use physical force against the lovely Marie Yovanovitch. Okay, moving to the next section of the federal crime of intimidation of a witness. Whoever knowingly uses intimidation, threatens, or corruptly persuades another person, or attempts to do so, or engages in misleading conduct toward another person with the intent to, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think we have intimidation. We don't have a threat. We don't have any attempt to persuade, let alone corruptly persuade Marie Yovanovitch to do anything. The president's tweet is not intimidating her, threatening her, corruptly persuading her to do any conduct. Okay? Next, whoever intentionally harasses another person and thereby hinders, delays, prevents, or dissuades any person from, and there are several things such as attending or testifying in an official proceeding, reporting to a law enforcement officer a violation of something or other, arresting or seeking the arrest of another person, causing a criminal prosecution. So, did President Trump, with that tweet that Adam Schiff read on live television during the hearing to the former Ukrainian ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, did the president's tweet constitute the crime of intimidation of a witness? Did it intentionally harass Yovanovitch and thereby hinder, delay, prevent, or dissuade her from testifying? Does anybody have the answer? You're welcome to call in 717-540-0580. Did the president's tweet harass Marie Yovanovitch and thereby hinder, delay, prevent, or dissuade her from testifying? You all know the answer. Come on. Of course it didn't. First of all, she was testifying during the tweet. She was read the tweet, and she continued to testify. The tweet is not, it did not hinder, delay, prevent, or dissuade her from doing anything. The tweet was not harassment. The tweet had a point, and the point was Yovanovitch didn't do a good job. The Ukrainian president didn't want her there, so Trump fired her, as he has the complete unfettered discretion to do so. That's the point of the tweet. And there was Trump has no attorney there questioning this witness, who could have said, former Ambassador Yovanovitch, thank you for your public service and all that, yada, yada, yada. Like they do that for 5 minutes. Every time they want to ask her a question, they got to thank her for her public service. I would like to say, what have you done to protect and advance the interests of the United States of America? Because I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard a thing. That's what I'll thank you for. I'm not going to thank you for sitting there in that government office and accepting a massive salary and massive benefits for 30 years while doing nothing. So former Ukrainian Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, what have you done to protect the national interests of the United States of America in the past 30 years? Can you name anything? What have you done to stop corruption in Ukraine? Name one thing. One thing. She couldn't. Anyway, those are the questions that I would ask. But the questions, the questions that Trump's attorney would have asked were, doesn't the president have the right to fire a U.S. ambassador, to recall you ambassador for any reason? Yes. And the Ukrainian president didn't like you, Ms. Yovanovitch. I'm sorry, he didn't like you. We like him. He's going after corruption. You didn't do a thing about corruption when you were the ambassador to the Ukraine, so out you go. That's the way I would have handled it. But it looks like that's about all the time we have today. I want to thank you all for listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. Tune in every Saturday at 1 o'clock on WHP 580 AM and iHeartRadio.